All right. Good evening, everyone. Hopefully, you guys are doing well. Happy weekend. I think everything's set up here. I always seem to wait to the last minute to do things. So, anyway, yes, we are getting started. Let me know if the audio is okay. I have my microphone a little bit lower in gain today, and that's a little further away. So, if it feels like it's more room audio than microphone audio, I'll go ahead and uh, adjust that. Audio is clear. Good. Okay. Oh, I just hit it. Okay. That's the first thing. Let me grab a swig of water real quick. And unfortunately, I do not have a Dune shirt. We're not going to really be talking about Dune. It's there. I mean, we can if you want, but I think I have the right Wi-Fi. Okay, good. But instead, I do have a Star Wars shirt, so you can see Star Wars, and it's the original. It's kind of a little on the bigger side because that's all the I think it was Dollar Tree that my husband gave it found. So, but it's it's getting warm, although we had a really cold day today. So it's gonna be Star Wars. Man, I feel like something's off about my camera, but that's okay. That's all good. All right, let me go ahead and actually take off this banner. Second Chances, which I released April. I need to release more music. Let me also adjust that a little bit better. Yeah. Is that better? All right. Banners. Second Chances. All right. Yep. So anyway, hopefully you guys are doing well. I'm glad the audio is clear. I changed a little bit of the setting from my interface, so we'll see how that goes. Let's all talk. Yeah, I mean, we'll definitely use Dune as an example of what I want us to talk about today. That's why I have the thumbnail, but it's not meant to be anything like, oh, let's talk about let's talk about the differences between story and book. I'm going to adjust the light just a little bit. Oh, there it goes. One sec. It's going to be bright, so let me switch off the camera for a second. There we go. That should be a little bit better. It's kind of hurting my eyes. All right. Yeah, that I think that's better. We'll see. Yeah. All right. So anyway, I used Dune Part 2 as the thumbnail because it's just we're just talking about culture and how people are reacting to different things. But before I get into any of that, this off the cuff kind of stream, let's go ahead and welcome the chat. And of course, I've been very, I would say I have neglected my prof the last couple of weeks with his comments. So he says, if I could read it, okay. He says, I'm just watching for the cinematic experience. So we were kind of making fun of people a little bit, just like lightheartedly. Where a lot of people are just like, you got to see Dune Part 2 for the cinematic experience. It's all about the cinematic experience. I have not felt this cinematic experience in years in the theater. And I was like, okay, well, interesting. So that's what we're talking about. The cinematic experience, and really how the cinematic experience is effectively killing stories, and no one seems to care. So let's go ahead and welcome the chat. Nathaniel is here. Welcome. By the way, if I feel like I have any memory slips or anything, remember, we all lost an hour last night. So it could be rough. This stream could be a rough one. I don't think so. It'll be fun. I'm expecting it to be fun. Let's see. Ghost Planet, welcome. Good to see you. Brian Gilmartin, also welcome. Got news for you. The cinematic experience is killing video games as well. Oh, this is true. I do hear that a lot of developers are pushing out games with way more story than gameplay. That's my impression. But I don't do new games, so I go back to the retro games. But anyway. Junk, welcome. You say the bar has been officially been lowered yet again because of a good chunk of people must consume by all means necessary. And I will never deny that Denis Villeneuve, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce his French name. I have no doubt he's probably created a really beautiful looking film. But not every single, but a lot of praises I hear about Dune is just how it looks or the movie going experience. I don't really in any way I hear about people talk about the story. They're asking questions like, did this happen in the book or this didn't happen in the book? But they don't really talk about the story. They don't praise. I've not heard people, I could be wrong. Maybe you've seen it and I haven't, but I have not heard people praise that it was an epic story. Although, let's put this out of the way and then I'll get back into the chat. I have heard people because I needed to hear the Hans Zimmer score, and you know what, guys, it's an experience, but no one can hum it. No one can remember it. No one is, oh, the soundtrack is amazing. No one will remember that soundtrack in like 3 years because there's no theme. Even the more melodic parts of that soundtrack doesn't have a fixed theme that you can refer back to. Like if you think of Indiana Jones theme, you guys are probably humming it right now. Now, not to say you have to sound like John Williams, but like people say, oh, the soundtrack for Dune is so. If you actually like scroll through the soundtrack, it sounds the same all throughout because it's an experience. So we're going to be talking about that. But I wanted to also say that because I looked at the soundtrack, I started having a lot of Dune commentary in my feed, and one such video, I didn't listen to it, but one such video had the thumbnail saying, better than Empire Strikes Back, and it's like you can't compare Dune to Star Wars. People are already comparing Dune to Star Wars, and I would just say they're two different flavors of pie. You can have pumpkin pie and you can have apple pie. You don't need to think like apple pie needs to be non-existent just because you have pumpkin pie. So Dune and Star Wars, yes, it's true. George Lucas took a lot from Dune. Oh, not a lot, but he was inspired by a lot of things out of the Dune world. But it's definitely not the same story. It's not the same. It's not a close the hero story. There's not really a hero story in Dune. It's more of a cautionary tale, So, anyways, all right. So that was just a little bit of a stretch. All right, Ghost Planet, Junk are talking and stuff. Stuff I don't really know about. Good, Professor Geek, my one and only channel member, which is not true. He's my one and only husband. Music is coming in clear. Good. Awesome. Takes forever for this comment to go. Yeah, there you go. Private Eye, good to see you. Nice to always have you here. Wela Yamuna is here. I can either type and chat or look at the stream. This new layout of YouTube. Yeah, I don't really know. I have trouble with the chat too. Recently, maybe it's just my phone is outdated or the app is outdated or something like that. But recently, when I look on people's live streams, and usually I like to have the chat up. Like, so if I'm eating dinner or something like that, and I'm listening to a live stream, I like to actually see how the chat's working. And sometimes the chat gets stuck. Like it doesn't scroll for many minutes until you drop a comment or until you refresh, and it's not that great. Oh, if you turn it off in theater mode, then the chat window does not load. Okay, good to know. Maybe I'll try that to fix my problem. All right. Final Fantasy, nice to see you. Cult Television, you're new here. Welcome. Good. All right, I think Spider Rules. Yep, good to see you. Already talking amongst yourselves. This is great. I love it that you guys are having some conversations. That's great. Let's see. Brian Gilmartin says, thankfully, some newer games do emphasize their gameplay better than the AAA stuff. Fight and Range, for example. Yeah, new stuff. I don't even know the names of the new games. But yeah, I mean, I like both story and gameplay. But if I had to choose, I prefer gameplay. Like my favorite games that I'll always go back to is Donkey Kong. There's no story. Or there's an objective. Bad crocodile nemesis takes away the horde of bananas. they gotta get the horde bananas. Pretty simple, but it's still a classic game. And then DKC 2 and 3 involve some kidnapping and stuff, but it's still so good. 21 people in the chat. Well, hopefully I do not fail you guys. That's awesome. All right. Let me see if any more people have shown up. Eldridge fan, good. He says chicken pot pie versus pumpkin pie. You can have both. You know, you can have both slices of pie. You also say you like the music in the Lynch version. I've never seen. So here I'm going to say this. I haven't seen the Dune films. I haven't even seen the Lynch version, which we do have. I see it on the shelf, so I'll approach it. I really do appreciate the book. I need to read the book probably it would be my third time reading the first book. I never read the subsequent books. So, and I understand it's a pretty expansive world. Dig Outlaw, good. And Andreas Hernandez. What are your words of wisdom today, Soundgiver? Well, not so much. Well, we'll see. We'll see. This stream is meant to be speculation. Oh, by the way, is the camera right? Like, is it supposed to be where it's supposed to be? I haven't seen anyone say that it's reversed. Like on StreamYard, it looks good, but I can't tell. Big Al. So actually, just to, I'm not going to be talking about Dune, but just in case to have some information, I refreshed my memory of Dune with Professor Geek with Big Al as his co-host. They did a wonderful Dune book study a few years back. So if you want to at least know the events of the first book, as well as wonderful Jungian themes by, of course, my wonderful prof and husband, who is a specialist in that kind of scholarly field, check out that, because he's very good about his analysis with Dune and what Herbert was working with. What I don't recommend is other academics talking about Dune, because they're so scientific about it, and they're so real world about it. Like, you need to analyze a piece of fiction as a piece of fiction, not as a literal representation of, you know, I mean literal representation of the real world. Yeah, you can have some universal themes and stuff like that, but or psychological themes in the case with Dune. But yeah, that's anyway. So okay, so we got a lot of people here. Let's talk about some stuff. All right, just making sure I'm not missing anyone. I think I got everyone in the chat. Okay, good. All right, so 24 people. Dang, that's awesome. Okay, so Dune Part 2 came and released, and there's so much hype about it. And I understand the hype. People say it's a great couple of films because it's in 2 parts, which I think film-wise, it would make sense that, well, would it make sense if it was 2 parts? I hear the films have a really long running time. A lot of people just don't have time for that. And I'm not even talking about the short attention span. A lot of people think, well, I can't ask my babysitter to babysit our kids, you know, for, you know, more than 4 hours, and then, you know, throw in $100 or whatever for a night at Dune. So I think a lot of people may have thought the running time was pretty long. I actually was listening, Big Al, I can't remember, like, I think more than one person streamed this. I don't know if you can bridge like a stream between, is it called simulcast or whatever? I think that's the term for it, because I've seen it before, but not on YouTube. But anyway, Big Al was talking with 3 different people, channels I haven't really seen before, but they were talking about their experience with Dune. And there were some, you know, they were talking about differences between the film and the books, and one person hadn't read the books, rather. And by and large, Big Al and another gentleman, they were expressing more like there were things lacking in the story, like things that really should have happened in the film because they happened in the book, because they did not happen, or they happened in a different way. That really entails a very different set of stories, you know, subsequent installments of film, if Dune continues. And so I got to thinking about that, and the lady on the panel, she said something that was kind of eye-opening, that I was kind of surprised to hear, especially with something like with the Dune movie experience. She said she enjoyed the film, but she says she does not have a need to go back. And I'm not saying every filmmaker that their number one objective is to have the person come back to the film, but I tell you, I think the best movies out there are the movies you revisit again, or at least recall to mind. Like for instance, I mean, I don't have to watch uh, Shawshank Redemption over and over again. I know many people do, or I've known many people who do, but I remember what the movie was. I remember it being a pivotal piece of film. Would I watch it again? Yeah, I mean, I'm not planning to, but I would watch it another time to witness that story, uh, another time, like another decade or something, you know. So, the filmmaker, I believe, not just for money reasons, I believe the filmmaker that objective is to have the person revisit their story, revisit their film. And so when this lady on the panel, on the stream that Al had on his channel, when she said, I enjoyed it, I guess I could watch it again, but I don't need to watch it again. Like there's no reason, especially with the long running time. And I thought that was pretty. I thought that was pretty interesting. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, we've got people who say, I've watched it twice. I'm going to watch it again. I'm going to watch it 7 times because of the cinematic experience. And I thought, okay, it's good. Like I'm glad you've had your cinematic experience, but was the story good? Or not even just was the story good. Was the story played out as Herbert intended? Because there are themes and events in the story that I haven't seen the film. I'm just taking Big Al's word for it, for instance, because he's read the books and now he's seen the film. Things play out differently. What are the reasons for them to play out differently? I mean, if I would think that if I were a filmmaker in charge of playing or making Dune, I would really want to go into those core psychological themes that Herbert laid out. Things that were pretty that were pretty clear cut, not clear cut, but I would say prevalent, like in the Jungian ideas. Especially set in the 60s and 70s. In the mid 20th century, getting into the later 20th century, and definitely taking its literary limelight. Dune was a literary sci-fi epic work. Like people, when they think sci-fi, they think of Dune before they think of Asimov's Foundation, or even 2001 Space Odyssey. I would say 2001 Space Odyssey, completely different story, but I would I would put it on the level of Dune as far as it being a classic. You don't have to read the subsequent. Actually, the second book is pretty good, but the first book is a classic sci-fi. But most people think of Dune when they think sci-fi. When they think of going to a sci-fi work, they're going to think of going to Dune first. One reason is Dune was visual inspiration for the space opera. Whether it's well, I mean, again, it's so different from Star Wars, but again, you can draw, at least visually speaking, some similarities. Story completely different. I mean, the whole world building and how the systems are set up completely different. But anyway, so going back to the cinematic experience, some people, there's one group of people who are like, that was fine. I enjoyed it for what it was. Beautiful soundtrack, beautiful visuals, but I don't need to see it again. And then people would say, I have to relive this cinematic experience. But now, again, I haven't done a lot of digging, so I'll admit that. But just my impression, some people are just going back to the film just for the cinematic experience. And I want to posit this. Is that enough? Is the cinematic experience enough for the filmmaking industry? Some people believe so. There was another gentleman on the stream. I think his channel name is Latino Slant. So I'm sure he has more of a Hispanic perspective on film. that's my take. But he was saying, while I didn't appreciate some of the changes, this guy, Latino Slant, he was saying that he would go back because this is important for cinema. And what he meant by that was it was specifically important. The cinematic experience was specifically important for cinema or for the film industry. Now, I will have a different opinion on that. I think, yes, the filmmaker should give you a cinematic experience, but that exclusively on its own is not enough to have for the film to have longevity, posterity even. Like the Dune films, as far as the stories are concerned, will not have the posterity as the books have. It because of neglecting certain themes and ideas. One thing that you cannot deny, going back to kind of the sentiments that Frank Herbert had, or at least built in his world. I'm not saying he had them, but there are specific roles and ideas of gender, specifically binary roles. And by binary, I don't mean the colloquial use of the word binary. I mean the masculine as separate from the feminine and vice versa, and then a bridging of the two in some way. So, it's, as Professor Geek points out in his book study, it's quite Jungian. It's highly philosophical. Now, my impression is a lot of people's commentators said that they removed those gender roles. And by the way, this is not a feminist take. I say gender roles, I mean by very specific means that Herbert used psychologically. People were saying in their different commentary videos that they removed those because either they were problematic or maybe it's just a little too confusing. One person said they removed Aaliyah, the daughter, her prescience and prescience, I think that's how you say the word. They removed her even being born and being a child of, having an adult mind, like kind of the savant adult mind as of, I think she's like 4. She's like between 2 and 4 years old when we do see her in the book. And she speaks and thinks not even just as an adult, but like she has the memory of generations past and memory of lineage and stuff like that, which makes her very scary, makes her very odd and unnerving and uncanny. But some people were suggesting that Denis Villeneuve. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Dennis. I'm going to say Dennis, the filmmaker. People were suggesting that they got rid of having her be present as a little child in the movie because maybe they supposed he didn't want the horror aspect. I'm like, she's a little creepy and uncanny, but she doesn't have to be horror. It's like I think fitting her into the film would have been fine as a little girl. If you want to add a little creepiness to her because that's, she does have that for different reasons, that's fine. You don't need to make any horror element and stuff like that. But anyway, it's half hour in and I got to talk about the crux of my theme here real quick. So the cinematic experience. So people are saying that the cinematic experience, at least they're insinuating that it's enough to keep the film industry going. And while the cinematic experience is important, it is not enough to keep the film, to have posterity. And I say posterity more of a legacy thing. I know posterity is more of a familial thing. I'll say longevity. So for the film to have longevity, for it to outlast the time of its maker, the time of the filmmaker, the generation it was made, for it to be long lasting, a cinematic experience is not enough. But people say it is. People think that's fine. And why is this? And the reason, actually, people may not realize that this attitude of the cinematic experience actually comes from a couple of art movements in the mid 20th century, actually really starting with World War I, getting into the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And this idea of experience, witnessing the film being immersed in the film as an experience, not really mining, paying any mind to the story or anything, but having it just be a vivid experience. That actually is an example of the happenings movement or the fluxus movement of the 50s, 60s, and 70s, really the 60s and 70s, where people like attendees of the concert or the performance art piece, they're as much involved in the artwork as the artists themselves. Now, this seems a little bit like, well, you can't compare a performance art with a film. Like there's an absolute divide. You see the people on the screen, they're actors who, you know, during principal photography acted out their scenes. This is something of the past. Now you're witnessing it on the screen. So it's not a full immersion, but the sentiment is there. It is more important for you to feel the experience than actually behold a story or a piece of art that is a tale, a story. So hopefully I'm making sense just kind of with that premise. I'll give you one very specific example, and that is Hans Zimmer's score. So many people are reveling, so to speak, in their words with Hans Zimmer's score because it's a pretty impressive soundtrack as an experience. As far as music and music composition, it's really not at all that impressive. You know, you've got like some thudding, you've got some you know, voices and choruses doing experimental stuff. You've got these big old sounding synths and working with subwoofers, like a deep ground bass energy. You've got a big sound with Hans Zimmer's score, the king of synthesizers. Well, I also think Tangerine Dream, they're pretty good too. I think he performed in Tangerine Dream at one point. I'm not sure, but anyway, you've got a big sound, you've got a big feel with Hans Zimmer's score. But compositionally speaking, it does not work for a film soundtrack in the traditional sense. Yes, I dare say, I said it, traditional sense. The film score is to cue the viewer on what is about to come or just telling the story. The film score has little musical signatures. It has themes. It has little musical gestures. It has motives. All these things are important, and they are set in place to cue the viewer. Oh, this is about this idea. This signature, this musical idea is about this person or this group of people. This idea is about a notion. Like let's say the terrible purpose that Paul Atreides has in the book is its own music theme or has its own music theme. And every time Paul recounts the events and says, this is about my terrible purpose, then the theme appears. And then it cues the viewer to say, oh yeah, he's dwelling on his terrible purpose. This is the theme for the terrible purpose. Maybe Jessica has her own theme. Maybe Duke Leto has his own theme for the time he's on screen, for the time he's in the story. Betrayal with Dr. Yue, maybe that has a theme. Like all Baron Harkonnen would totally have a theme. The Harkonnen house would have a theme. The Atreides house would have a theme. All these things are very much put into place in film or with a musical or something like that. Definitely with opera and definitely with film. I haven't seen the Dune film, the recent Dune film, but the way Hans Zimmer works with the music score is not with theme, it's not with signatures, it's not with cueing in on specific elements of the story. It's for an experience, because you can kind of, whether you're on some substance or not, you just sit in a room and you just listen to it and it's like, yeah, it sounds cool. And then you can start developing your own ideas and your own stories with his soundtrack. That's the thing, is like music scores need to be very specific to that story. I've said this before, Star Wars is definitively Star Wars. That soundtrack is definitively Star Wars. That recent Wonder Woman theme is not a good theme because it could be used for anything. It's not exclusively Wonder Woman. I can't even hear Wonder Woman in her recent theme. So music is very important. Hans Zimmer does not do that with the Dune score. He's very ambiguous. He's not ambivalent. It's just you get the sense of like Yeah, I could see a formidable desert planet. Yeah, I could see sandworms and stuff like that, but I could see other stuff with it too. It doesn't have to be Arrakis. It doesn't have to be Paul Atreides trying to overcome something. It could be something else. And so it's this big emotion. It's not even emotional. It's just this a feeling. It's like this. You're in this status, like this, or stasis rather. You're in this stasis of what it sounds like, what it feels like, and then you move on. But how many people who love the Dune soundtrack, how many people can hum the Dune soundtrack? There's no specific like exclusive purpose for that film. Like that soundtrack was meant to just sound big and sci-fi. So he accomplished that. He accomplished that for sure. So anyway, that's that's an example of experience. That is not an example of storytelling. So with Hans Zimmer score specifically, it is not storytelling. It's just about the experience. Now, visuals, I don't know. So some people were saying visuals are so beautiful and all of that. I was looking at a few things. I saw some screenshots. I had different. I had a different look in my imagination. Dune looked different. I could be mistaken. I am not that impressed with the sandworms. Like they don't look. You've seen the old concept art, like kind of that Ralph McQuarrie look. Like the sandworms have kind of these like this not flower mouth, but like this. It's not maybe some triangulation of their mouth or something like that, or uh, maybe a four-cornered mouth with the teeth and stuff like that. You see the old art, like the old concept art from past, uh, uh, past art renditions and stuff like that. Maybe adaptations too, but definitely for book covers and stuff. The sandworms here, from what I could see, they just look like vacuum cleaner hoses. They don't look like that old 60s, 50s sci-fi concept art that I really wish like everything looks so modern. Like Dune looks like it was made in this decade. I was like, of course that's the case because with they're using all these visuals and stuff. I'm like, yeah, but Dune really should look like the 1960s as far as concept art is concerned. It should, you know. I had different. It looks Dune looks very different in my head. I can't really speak for visuals, but people say it's the cinematic experience. It's a beautiful film. Like I love it so much, and so why this is a problem if we're not careful is that people might say, okay, well this is course correcting all the negative things that are happening in Hollywood filmmaking. Like, okay, we got a really monumental film. Now Hollywood is going to correct itself. Yeah, course correction. I'm just gonna say Hollywood. That's kind of the sentiment that can come from this Dune films. Like Hollywood can correct itself now. Now Hollywood knows what people are raving about. Like this was an amazing a film to see. Not so much story. No one's been talking about the story. So Hollywood kind of take notes and stuff like that. Well, but the film itself, from what I'm hearing of people, is pretty much the same. It's still doing what Hollywood is doing, and that's the removal of story, and that's the removal of archetypes and themes and all of that. You've got that experience that you think, oh, that's really thrilling, but it's not meant to last. I have a feeling that Dune is not meant to last. And that's because when there's so much emphasis on the experience of something, going back to the 1960s and 70s with the happenings and the fluxus and all those art movements that said art is real life is art. It's a merging of the two. It's all about the experience, the ongoer and the attendee experiences it as much as the artist. There's no border, there's no barrier. The artist and the attendee, they fit the same role. That kind of sentiment, well, what does that do? It's like, well, if the art piece is the experience, then you go about your day forgetting about that art piece like years to come. Like you don't those art pieces, those performance art pieces are not meant to last. Sentimentally and philosophically, they're not meant to last. The artist doesn't think of the artist of those performance art movements of the 1960s and 70s. They don't want their art piece to have a lasting impression. They don't want their art pieces to have legacy. They're just there for the experience. They're just there to make a point, have everyone experience it like they've experienced it, and move on. To some degree, I think this is the same case with Dune. Now I could go on, but I don't want to sound so redundant. But just kind of as a recap before I lose you all, and I'll get into the chat. I think Dune is an offshoot. The film Dune is an offshoot of this past sentiment of the performance artwork, where experience is all that matters. Ideas, that's all that matters, but not longevity, not legacy, not story. So my educated guess is that the films will be forgotten. I think these Dune films that everyone's praising now will be forgotten, and the books will continue having their life, so anyway, let's get to the chat. Hopefully I made some sense. I am without an hour of sleep, so that could have lost a couple of you. But you might have some things to say. Let's see, going back up. Wow, you guys have a lot of things to say. Okay. All right, I'll probably just continue with comments directed to me after games. Spidey Rule says games are turning into movies these days, and not even good ones. I guess that would be a fair assessment. I'll still highly applaud the recent Guardians of the Galaxy game. That was good. And it was a wonderful story, but the gameplay, and I was watching it because it's not my kind of game to play, but I was completely, that's the thing. I was completely immersed in that game. We're talking about immersion and experience. And I would have to tell my husband, Professor Geek, I'd have to tell him, hey, I'm not talking to you not because I'm not interested, but I'm fully immersed in the story. And that game is probably one of the best games I've seen that is a new game. Great story, but the gameplay, there's nothing lacking in the gameplay. It's such a well-told story. The dialogue was spot on every time. The characters and the characterizations it is a very good game. And it didn't lose the gameplay, and it didn't lose the story. It was an overall very good experience, but it was also a work of art. Have it be a work of art that's not ephemeral, that lasts, that you can, revisit. That's the whole point of my stream, I think. Junk says the cinematic experience, in quotes, is why so much media is over budgeted as well. That's a very good point. It's why we have so many layers off, layoffs in entertainment. I think, the more I read classic sci-fi, or at least the more I read stories that were published in the 70s and 80s and as early as 50s and 60s, some of these short stories are perfect settings for plays or short film that wouldn't need more than $1 million or two to make it work. Would the interest be there? Probably not. As far as short stories are concerned, people don't really read short stories. I love short stories. I write short stories. I hope to publish some short stories in the very near future, like in a year or so. And you don't need a big budget. I think, I'm sorry. Did I miss a super chat? Well, let me go to the super chat and then go back up. But yeah, I do see there is a super chat. Eldritch fan, thank you for the $1.99. You say experience equals I watch it while getting high. I know Well, that you be funny. You be funny about that. You're funny about that, but at the same time, um, I think that's how people are treating like the Hans Zimmer score. It's like this is so amazing, man, so good. I'll tell you, and I'll get back to the chat too. But like the reason why people are so enamored by Hans Zimmer's electronic score is because they're not really familiar with the electronic music genre to begin with. Electronic music can be incredibly attractive as far as sound and instrumentation. I compose electronic music. I know what a good sound is. But where electronic music fails in a lot of different ways is it ceases to become musical. It's maybe a drone with some little soundscapes. It's maybe layering. I'm not saying layering's bad, but a lot of people just kind of drift. You know, they're just drifting, and they just want to be in the zone, man. But that's electronic music, because electronic musical instruments can be or virtual instruments, they can be so attractive. But then people forget things like melody or a bass line or percussion. They forget a good drum kit, you know. And not everyone, not every artist, but you can fall into that trap if you don't know what you're doing. I think in some ways Hans Zimmer has fallen into that trap. He is totally capable. We've seen his previous films, Lion King, Pirates of the Caribbean. These are good melodies. So many of Lion King's melodies, like the older movie, I'm not talking about the recent movie, but the movie in the 90s, the animated movie, is gorgeous. The melodies are so moving. Like the death of Mufasa. It's so riveting. So Hans Zimmer is completely capable of creating very nice melodies. Maybe he's lost it. Maybe he's lost that art of creating melody. But people say, well, I don't need melody when I have people say I don't need melody when I have good electronic music. And like we see that with a little bit of Kevin Kiner, not always, who's doing Star Wars now. The Swedish guy, Göransson, who's pretty much like the protege of Hans Zimmer, he doesn't work with melody hardly at all. He just works with mood. He just works with beat. He just works with the kind of like a primitive, like humanistic feel for, well, that kind of humanistic feel, that kind of tribal feel of how electronic music can sound really big and all that. And I'm not disregarding his Oppenheimer score or whatever, because people are raving about that too. But when he tried to write melodies for Star Wars, the shows, they fell so flat. They fell so flat. He didn't know how to do transition. Man, the transition for the Mandalorian theme is awful. It's not good. It's like a D- as far as transition and everything. He tried to sound like John Williams, but he couldn't, because he's so fixed on the synthesizer. And again, I love electronic music. I compose electronic music, but I also know the classic, going back to melody. No one works with things like mode mixture anymore, or 4-part harmony, or chorales or anything. Like, no one works with fundamental things you need for harmony and melody, including Hans Zimmer. He has a drone, and I'm not against drones, because drones are great. He has this drone, and then this little flute saxophone melody, and then it gets into this feel. Bra. What's that name? the brass section. So anyway, so going back to Eldridge Fan's comment, some people, it's like his music is it makes you high without the substance, because that's effectively what electronic music can do if it's a big enough sound, if it's got the right instruments. But if it started playing with melody and harmony and bass and percussion, people would get off that high. So anyway, I know it's just a composer talking. I know music, I know the effects, like the emotional effects. I mean, go to a church that's not a Catholic church. Go to like any Protestant church, like Baptist church. Go to the worship music. Like I shouldn't say this because I'm a Christian, but if you go to a church, go to the worship section and they'll play all the right songs with all the right chords. I don't care for worship music myself. Hands will go up in worship as soon as that kick drum, as soon as that kick drum falls. If there's like a quiet bridge and then there's this build up and then do 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 boo like that, then everyone's like hands are praising and stuff like that. Like, yeah, I'm praising Jesus. I'm like, you're probably just you are praising Jesus, but you're also affected by the kick drum. Anyway, the parish that we go to has no acoustic instruments. It's just us singing because it's a 5 o'clock mass, and I like it. I like it a lot. Anyway, let's continue. 1 second, real quick. I'm still here. I feel like I'm tilted somehow. Oh, I know why. Because I'm trying to lean against. I'm leaning against this arched back thing for my back because I'm getting old. Nathaniel says soundtrack for Godzilla -1 was top notch. I should check that out. Yeah, people say that Godzilla -1 was a very much a human story. And so it's not my favorite genre. I don't have to watch it, so I will take people's word for it that people were blown away by the story and that it was a fraction of the typical Hollywood budget. And but I will check out the score. Yeah. Do you know who composed it? Spidey Rule says, as a musician, have you noticed that a lot of background music for movies and TV these days have turned into wallpaper music? It's so true. Oh, I've noticed. Not only that, and this is where AI is getting a lot of people into trouble, but some of these, even through my phone speakers, some of these ads, the music behind them are horribly mixed. Like I've practiced it. I have practiced mixing my music for a number of years now. I'm not a professional. I wouldn't hire my services, although I really have a good ear. Not tooting my horn, but I am. I have a good ear. I have a high fidelity ear. I catch things that even I've hired a mastering engineer, and he's like, "How did you catch that?" I'm like, did you catch this at minute and 18 seconds here? He's like, how in the world did you catch that? I'm like, I have good ears, and so that really aids my mixing. And then I'm starting to master. I'm learning to just the very, very bare bones of mastering. But my last track, Second Chances, that was my first mastering of my own music, and I'm pretty happy with it. It's a very simple track, so it's not too extensive. But anyway, my whole point was some of these ads, even through the phone speakers, sound awful, but through headphones, it's horrible. It's it's as if someone has no equilibrium and balance in their head. It's like their head is made of like some mix. Whoever put the music together has no sense of balance, no sense of center in their head, with hearing. And they're so bad. They're just so they're so the music stinks. And for TV, for TV, I don't watch a lot of shows. A couple things that TV shows really need to work on, though, because sometimes my mother-in-law will be watching a film while we put in some pizza or something like that, and some of these shows, the music mixed, the mix is wrong, unless it's the monitor speakers that the TV has, but then also it's too much. It's mixed over the dialogue. It's like this ground energy really needs to be brought down even better. One thing I really appreciate is something like the Batman animated series, and also stuff like Stargate. When the music ramps up, it's for very important moments of the story. But even with an animated show like Batman animated series, it could go for a minute or two without any music. Even in an action scene, there was one action scene I remember seeing, and it was just sound effects. I was like, That's pretty impressive for an animated show. And so people are very uncomfortable with silence, even when people are talking, like like in a forensics lab or something like that. It's like, why don't you just have no music? See, I like no music in my shows because when the music does come, it's for a reason. I hate this kind of ominous drone throughout the whole thing. It's like it ends up happening is it reduces the tension between characters. Um, there are very good cues with Stargate. There was one dialogue that I remember. It started out really funny, and then it got a little serious. But the music did not cue in. There was no cue until one person says another thing as the other person's walking away. The person stops, doesn't turn around for a second. Then the music comes in, and then he turns around and counters the question. And so the person walks back saying, "You really think that?" and stuff like that. It's like, it got serious. See, the music, it's when the music is supposed to tell you, okay, it's not funny anymore. Like something is a little suspicious, something is ominous, and that's what it needs to do. It's what it needs to do. All right, let's continue. Hopefully, I haven't been freezing too much. I do see my StreamYard freeze a little bit, but yeah, good, awesome. All right, let's continue on. Ghost Planet says Broken Arrow soundtrack is better than Zimmer score. It was used for Scream 2, and Danny Elfman scored a scene 2. Broken Arrow. Well, if it's horror, I might not listen to it, but well, that's the thing is like out of all the genres, I think horror can continue with that kind of electronic score. But I made this point before. Excuse me. I made this point before. The electronic music is definitely taking over the film score industry. There's some elements of orchestra, but it's kind of half and half now, especially with TV shows, like some Marvel show or whatever. And but what tends to happen is like you don't the electronic space is saying, well, we got cool sounds, that's enough. Well, just do the electronic music with the melodies. I mean, Vangelis did that with Blade Runner. He did that phenomenally with Blade Runner. And then the second Blade Runner film, there were some musical cues, but not as much as before. All right. Final Fantasy says comparing Dune to Star Wars would be the equivalent of taking an apple and an orange and saying, "Oh yeah, fruit." Yeah, it's like I said it before. It's like two different flavors of ice cream. It's like it's a sci-fi movie, so yeah, it's ice cream, but it's like, okay, you can have both, but we need to compare. We need to compare vanilla with chocolate. It's like they're two different flavors. Like it's kind of like the whole. It's almost like okay, I could be stretching it. It's almost like a false binary. It's like, you can't like cats if you like dogs. It's like you can like both. They're different. They're completely different. They're four-legged animals. You keep them around as pets, but they're still different. Star Wars is not Dune. No matter how many things that Lucas may have taken as inspiration, it's completely different. So when people are saying, they're saying like, why Dune is replacing Star Wars, it's like, well, it won't like the traditional Star Wars that we all know and love. Like this Star Wars with all the characters, I don't know if you could see that because it's in black and white. That's not going away, Like Dune never took over Star Wars. Star Wars never took over Dune. In all the decades it's been around, it's like everyone accepted they were two different things. So anyway. All right, moving along down. Yeah, Ghost Planet says, I love both pies. Yeah, you can like pumpkin pie and you can like apple pie. The whole debate really is the pumpkin with the pecan. Now, I like pumpkin, but I do like pecan. But I like them both. I don't have to like one over the other. Cult Television says, commodify. Is it commoditized? Is that a word? commodified. Zimmer has. I hope I'm using. Let's see what you're trying to say. Zimmer has basically made film music into a cynical agency model. He started as my friend's uh, T-boy at Air Adele Studios in London. Oh, are you in the UK? Welcome. I think we have a few other people from the UK. Well, there. Okay, I'm going to say this carefully. And this is true of the film industry anyway. But there's a kind of nepotism that goes on. So starting with Hans Zimmer, who's going to be the next Hans Zimmer? It's going to be Göransson. Is that how you pronounce his name? Anyway, he's pretty much following after the footsteps of Hans Zimmer. And then everyone else is trying to be like Hans Zimmer with their electronic tracks. What was her name? Was it Natalie Hall? Natalie. It was the composer for the Kenobi series. I listened to the track, and it's not good. It's very bland. It's very forgettable, and so was probably why the show was forgettable too. Well, I didn't see the show, but anyway, I can't remember. I think it was Natalie Hall. I think that was her name. Sorry. All right. I hope I'm pronouncing this name right, Eldritch fan. Kyle MacLachlan in the Lynch version is the only Paul who captures the nobility and strength of the character of the book. I should see the adaptation, and I think this is the same actor who played Daisy Johnson's father in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I loved his performance. If it's the same actor, because I think Prof said it's the same guy. It's the same man. Yeah. And he looks like the same man. So Eldritch fan says Paul and Leto II, are the heroes of the saga. The only thing worse than what they did is the future that would have happened without them. I would have to read. Well, I haven't read the subsequent books, but the hero. It's not the same take as a Luke Skywalker story. That is for sure. Yeah, it's a lot more complex and dastardly in the way of politics. But I need to read God Emperor of Dune because the premise sounds really interesting. Andreas says, do you think the Dune movie is the Lord of the Rings of this generation? No. This generation could use a Lord of the Rings. This is not Lord of the Rings by any stretch of the imagination. And here's why. The movie will not be a go-to for most people. One, it's a long running time. Two, people have said the characters don't feel like you are with them or that you relate to them. You feel for Samwise Gamgee. You feel for Gimli. You feel for, in a pathological sense, a pathos sense, cathartic sense, you feel for Boromir and Faramir. You feel for the cast of characters, not even just because it's an adaptation of a really good book, but Peter Jackson was so mindful of his casting with Lord of the Rings. I used to watch Lord of the Rings. I haven't seen it in years, actually. I need to see it again. I haven't watched it in like almost 10 years now. Over 10 years. Wow. Yeah, now that I think about it. I used to watch it every time, like all the time. Like crazily. I didn't have a lot of movies, but it's like, why do I still go back to these movies? Even though I don't have a lot of movies, it's like it's kind of a weird thing to go back to these movies so frequently. And it's because they're so well done. There's no way anything about these Dune films, people will not, this is not a repeatable experience. For some, it is. People say, oh, I'm going to go back. I'm watching it a second time. I'm watching it a fifth time and stuff like that. But people won't watch it like they watch Lord of the Rings. So no, the two cannot be compared. And if people want to fight me on that, I mean, I'm not saying I'm right. Time will tell. I could be completely misguided and mistaken by that, but I just don't think so. Like, there is something so palatable about the Lord of the Ring films. There, for different reasons, completely different story, completely different genre. Even though there's a little bit of fantasy element in Dune, there is a Well, there's a number of things, but one of the things is the world building itself. Dune is a very interesting has an interesting world building to it, but more for things surrounding Arrakis, even though Arrakis is interesting in and of itself. Um, but with Middle Earth has time and legacy and stories and cultures and myths and legends, and it has so many things, and you can feel that in the film. It also has a lot of different topographies and terrain and all of that. Like you go through marshes, you go through forests, you go through plains, you go through mountains, you go through Mordor. You know, there's a lot more like visual variance. So that could be its own separate analysis, I think. So anyway. All right. So I think Prof says no mirror. Good. That's good. Which means I think it's right. All right. So Jung says Toto's composition for Dune. It sounded it ranged from the sounds were ranging from tribal to rock bliss. Yeah, that's actually pretty perfect. I don't know Toto's composition. I know them as a band. Not really hearing them more than once or twice, but yeah, I could probably I'll probably maybe I should listen to it and just kind of compare the soundtracks. Anyway. Junk is right concerning the question Andrea says about Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. You say, Junk, that you don't think so because barely anyone will talk about Dune in a year or so, and that's true. No one was talking about the first part like after a year. That was made that was released in 2021, so it's gonna be the same. I think people will always go back to Lord of the Rings as a film experience. And when I say film experience, I mean a film experience where you are understanding the story and it's not just a feeling, you know? Mm-hmm. Minimundus, welcome. I haven't seen you before. Nice to see you. What do you say? I don't use excuse me, you haven't seen the second, but you hate how they did the Sardaukar. I think that's how you pronounce that force in the first movie. Yeah, I don't even know what they look like in the film. I mean, I have so the Sardaukar, is that how you pronounce the name of the militant group of the emperor? There's a feeling and a look about them that I have, so I don't know what they look like in the film. Stunning and brave. Good to see you. Megatron. Hello there. Good. Brian Gilmartin says, we saw a lot of the same thing when the first Avatar movie was released. People get hung up on the visuals and the experience, even though the actual story was meh. Never saw Avatar. Never saw it. And the same is true, I think, with the second film too. No, what was it called? Water something? I can't remember. Yeah. Eldridge Fan asks me, what are the reasons it was changed? Do you need to ask turning Chani from a mother into a girl boss, new atheist? Guess why? Yeah, I mean, well, the thing is like there's so many different roles for the two genders. I don't think they wanted to approach it. Can film be adapted? I think so. Yeah. People say, well, it's an unfilmable book or whatever. You can't get the themes out. It's like, actually, you probably can. And I think there's a scene in the book where Leto, the Duke, beholds like a couple days before he dies, beholds this beautiful, ravishing sunset, and Arrakis with the is it the two moons or the two suns? I can't remember, but it's it moves him. He's deeply affected by the beauty of this. It's either a sunset or a sunrise. I can't remember, but and then I had that image like, wow, what would that look like? And yeah, as far as yeah, I mean, people speculated that Chani acted the way she did to Irulan in the movie because they couldn't think of it like a polytheistic political marital relationship, which was the intention for Paul to become emperor. I think he had another wife. Doesn't Paul have another wife? But he doesn't have the same endearment and affection as he has for that person as he has for Chani. I think it's Cheney. I think that's how you pronounce it. I've always pictured it Chani, but I heard Cheney from a couple people who were like Dune specialists. I don't know. And I don't know the Dune story. I've read the book twice. I don't know the story as much as something like Lord of the Rings, you know. So I don't know a lot of Dune lore. I just know bits and pieces. All right. Continuing on. Junk says Red Letter Media summed up the Avatar films pretty well. Avatar is a movie series seen by ghosts. The franchise has billions of dollars, yet no one talks about it. Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, yeah, no, even for its historical, like, didn't people call it historical? And yeah, it's like no one talks about it. Like, people will always talk about Lord of the Rings. They'll always talk about the Star Wars saga, like the original saga. They may still talk about the sequel trilogy, but not on the level that they would talk about the original stories. It's just because the story's there. It's not just about the experience, it's about the story. That's the thing, is like, you can have the experience not sacrificing the story. I'm freezing a lot. Adega Outlaw says Polly Latino Slant. Oh, is a friend of yours. He sometimes has unique takes. That's cool. Spidey Rules says, how dare you, gender is a spectrum, stop being so transphobic. Yeah. I have thoughts on that, but I'll keep them to myself. Did someone say binary? OMG, transphobia. I mean binary like in the traditional sense. One or the other. Yeah. Andreas says, oh, Sound of Grave about to become the next J.K. Rowling. I'm not that famous. The way she criticized gender. Yeah. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of people being mad at me for thinking there are only two genders. And if you're going to talk about something like Dune, there are phallic symbols, okay? Literal phallic symbols. And I say literal almost loosely, but kind of not. My husband, he's like, yes, they're phallic symbols. They're worms that penetrate into the sand and come out. It's like, yeah, I didn't know Herbert was after that. Thank you. And then you've got the Bene Gesserit, who are the manipulators. Like, they're the political manipulators. They go on emotion, manipulation, secrecy, genetic manipulation. I mean, that's kind of the dark side of the gender role that is women. Let's see. All right, I don't know exactly what you guys are saying amongst yourselves. Let's see. Raiders of the Lost Ark tells Indiana's story without even needing to see the film. I still need to see. I have not seen Indiana Jones, but guess what? I know the music. Brian Gilmartin, I think on the Zimmer score, I barely even remember what the Dune soundtrack was even like outside of the loud as all heck. Yeah, it's loud. It is so loud. There's no variance. There's no foreground, background, middle ground. There's just no one. I made this complaint before, but these electronic soundtracks, they don't understand space. They don't understand pulling out. They don't understand going between many voices and few voices. It's all atmosphere. It's just like your head is in this like fishbowl bubble, and it's like just take it, just take the sound. And it's like, what about pulling back and just having a few instruments? That's what I work with. And sometimes my music actually, my different tracks range as far as feel and even rhythm, but there's a general structure to it. I do work on that. Let's see. Continuing on. Exactly. New Dune will become either a random hill that critics and social media will choose to die on, or just another new film that's released. It's not. When I heard, I think Al said Sin's Corner is the channel name. When I heard her say that it's not a repeatable experience, it's like 3-hour film, multi-million-dollar budget, and it's not a repeatable experience. See, when I compose my music, I compose it in a way of like, I have to listen to that again. That's my objective as a composer. It's like I make a very attractive piece of music. The music I buy from different artists, they'll have tracks I listen on repeat. Now sometimes it's good for writing, but sometimes I'm like, I just like it on repeat. That's a good soundtrack, you know. And I do that as a composer. I want you to come back to my tracks. I want like yeah, well. Andrea says the Batman Arkham games are an example that you can have a cool story and still have a really fun game. Exactly. Jung says, it's why the words masterpiece and game changer have completely lost their meanings. I personally don't like the term game changer because it's lost its meaning. Like you say, it's lost its effect. People say, this is a game changer. I'm like, no, it's not. It's just a hype. It's just a trend that's going to be put out like a fire like in 3 months. It's a game changer. We're changing the future as you know it. It's like, no, you're not. Final Fantasy is talking about to Andreas about Final Fantasy VII Remake is not a remake. It's a passive aggressive commentary made by the director and the producer. I have no idea. I still need to play the original, so I have no idea if it's good or not. Nathaniel asks me, hearing you talk all about this music stuff with synthesizers and melodies is what makes me curious about your thoughts on ES. Oh, I don't know how to pronounce that word. ES posthumous. How do you pronounce that word? I know what it means. I just don't know how to pronounce it. I'm just gonna put it up on the chat on the screen so people could read it themselves because I have never been able to pronounce that word. ES posthumous. I'm probably making myself look like a fool because that you always have one or two words you just do not know how to pronounce, even if you know what it means. ESP. 1 second. I'm gonna grab some water. Still here. Just reading the comments. Surprised it's not that the heat's off. It's cold outside, but I'm not that cold. All right. Let me continue scrolling down. Okay, so Brian says you can't stand the cringe amount of swearing in Final Fantasy VII. Oh, I didn't know that. I mean, oh gosh, what's the guy with the gun on his hand? I forget his name. He's not really that forgettable either, but he has a lot of swearing in his language, but apparently there's a lot of swearing in the remake. Yeah. Junk says, also, I do feel you on the worship music. I come from an island that has ye old hymns, which is awesome. Hymns are great, wonderfully composed. People make fun of me. Like even older people in their 70s and 80s, they're like, "You listen to hymn music?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's really good composition." But a lot of people say too, like, "Oh, I don't sing hymns." I'm like, because I'm starting to teach a lot more voice, like vocal students. Some of these hymns are good for just you being able to sing a wide range of notes and a melody. And people are like, I don't sing that. I just sing some of these worship songs. It doesn't even matter what language you speak. Like, because I teach a lot of Hispanic children who want to get better at their voices, and so their worship, the songs they sing for their churches is in Spanish. And so I'm like, oh, can you sing along this YouTube video, or can you sing it by ear? And some of these melodies, like there used to be a structure called AB or ABA or ABBA or ABCA, kind of like poetry, right? Where you have an A melody and a B melody. Or in something like a worship song, it's a verse and a chorus. So for basic songwriting. And some of these worship pieces are just like this kind of just this monotone melody that kind of drifts between verse and chorus. And it's like I was saying to Professor Geek the other night, I'm like, I'm not God. This music is not directed to me. So, God cares about the heart when it comes to worshiping. But boy, oh boy, this wouldn't be the music that I would like to hear. But it's all about the heart. It's all about the heart. Oh no, chat is jumping around. David Clark. Same. It is the same active for Shield. Thank you for coming. You say you are first. Welcome. Hopefully you found some of this stream engaging. It was a little off the cuff and it was back and forth. Sometimes I feel like I'm a little bit better with my speaking, but anyway, you say it's very challenging to be creative. I agree. You are making some good observations that correlate with a bit of my experience. Thanks for sharing the stream. Well, thank you for coming. I talk about, so basically if you're new to my channel, on Sundays on my live streams, I talk about just art in general with different topics, books, stories, maybe film, maybe shows, but usually stories. But during the week, I actually post more music stuff. Like I work in SuperCollider and Logic Pro. Gotta continue working on SuperCollider stuff. But anyway, my live streams are not SuperCollider. They're talking about art. All right. Oh man, gosh. Leia Plus Size, good to see you. Hello, sound. How do you feel about the soundtrack for the Tron Legacy? I felt the sound fit the movie. It does. I would have to listen to it again to really be reminded of it. It fit the world building for sure. And it has to be that kind of electronic, like because it's paying homage to the Tron original film. The Legacy, I think, from what I remember, the Legacy did a good job with the original, like pointing back to the original, because it was such a wide, like wasn't it like 30 years or something difference or something? So what I remember of the soundtrack, and I think it was Daft Punk, right? Digital Domain and stuff like that. I remember enjoying it. Analysis wise, I would have to listen to it again before I would give my complete thoughts. I don't remember specific themes though, but again, it's been a long time. Anyway, thanks for coming though. Yeah, if you have any questions about movie soundtracks, who has great commentary on movie soundtracks is Soundtracks with Birdman. I haven't seen him lately on my streams. He's a channel member, but I hope he's doing well. But he usually has pretty good commentary. But his is more reactionary, like how he thinks. For soundtracks analysis, I really do want people to talk about why the movie does what it does. Why we can go back to things like Duel of the Fates, with Star Wars and stuff. Oh, Junk says Final Fantasy remakes are ashamed of their past. See, I didn't know this. Like, I don't know how they would be because I just don't. I don't know. That makes me nervous though because Visions of Mana's coming out, which I wanted to like Secret of Mana. I appreciate the game for what it was, but the story was just it was not good. The gameplay, the fighting was awesome. I had to work around some stuff with the fighting, but people hated the fighting. I liked the fighting in Secret of Mana. I thought it was really you got the flow of it. It was intuitive. I loved going back and forth between the three different characters. Um, didn't really appreciate the story. I final Secret of Mana is just a game I may never come back to. I wish there was a really good remake of a game. They did a remake of Secret of Mana. I don't know if the story's better. I might play the remake just to see. Um, Visions of Mana looks pretty good. So hopefully it's not, downing the past. I mean, I wish Secret of Mana had a better story because there was something special about Secret of Mana. But anyway, let's continue. You guys have a lot of things to say. But why I say that is like if they ever remade Terra Enigma or if they ever remade Chrono Trigger. I mean, I heard the maker of Chrono Trigger passed away, which is so sad. He was like 68. I'm going to say one thing though. Those people who worked on those games never slept. I don't think they took care of themselves. I think I don't know too much about the Japanese culture, but it's my impression that the work environment, especially with something like game development for Nintendo and other companies, they work to the bone. They don't take care of themselves. And so like when I think he's like 68 or something. And I'm like, dang, that's young. That's young, but it's my impression that those game developers did not sleep or eat and stuff like that when they were working on those awesome games. Chrono Trigger is a masterpiece. Again, like we talk about the experience, it's like if you want a good experience, you make art repeatable. Chrono Trigger is a game I will always go back to. I've only played it once and I will play it again. Secret of Mana? No. Unfortunately. Oh. All right. Final Fantasy says that Final Fantasy 3 and 4 remakes are faithful to the original. That's good. Final Fantasy 7 remake is Kingdom Hearts 3 levels of crud storytelling. Okay. I didn't know that. That's too bad. You know, isn't my impression that people have made Cloud extremely morose over the years? Like I've seen walkthroughs of the original game and he has a little bit of levity to him, doesn't he? Like he has a little bit more spunk. But people have made him really because he has, later we do see he has a psychological breakdown for different reasons. But then after that, they have to make him so like morose and stoic. He's not like bubbly. He's not some of the other male protagonists, but yeah, anyway. It was just my impression that he was not that morose in the original game. He has a little bit of a smart mouth, but nothing like really gloom and stuff like that. All right. All right, let's see. Sorry, if I'm rubbing my arms, I have a little bit of tennis elbow. I've developed some tennis elbow on both my elbows, both my arms. And so if I'm stretching and stuff, it's made violin playing and even just music teaching in general kind of hard. So if you guys want to, if you send prayers my way, that'd be much appreciative because it is my livelihood. Music is my livelihood. So, but it's getting better with different preemptive measures. My typing is slower though. Oh yeah, I should show you. Let's see if you can see this. I got my wonderful prof bought me this new ergonomic keyboard. It lights up. If you could see that. Oh, does it? It's not. There we go. Lights up like that. You can't really see it in the color. I chose yellow It's got like blue, red, white, purple. But I like the yellow. I love yellow and black together. It's very sportsy. So yellow is my backlight color of choice. But I also did yellow because the key, the space bar is yellow, and the escape. Oh, there we go. So anyway, it's helped me with my wrists and my arms and stuff like that. But I've been writing a lot slower. My stories have been I've been typing them out a little slower. So oh well, it is what it is. Arm brace though. I have two types of arm braces that have really helped. People getting a little feisty about games and developers and stuff like that. Junk says once classical orchestral music is phased out, AI music will be pushed to replace electronic composers. I doubt it will succeed, but it will happen. I think while people are so caught up on the bandwagon of visual AI art, I don't think AI music will ever get its hype. I think by and large it's generally mocked, and it should be. But guys, I kind of think AI will phase out, at least in the artistic world. People say no, it's here to stay. It's going to be a long-lasting tool. I don't think so. I have a feeling it might be a few years, but I just have it in my gut. I could be wrong, but I have it in my gut that AI is going to be in at least in the art world, it's going to be obsolete. If anything, it's going to be like in its own little eclectic exhibition, you know. The symphony, people may not realize, or they may, but the symphony is predominantly funded by patrons who go to the concerts. And as soon as those patrons die off, the symphony will not be able to sustain itself. So I think the symphony still has a few generations left. But symphony, the reason why they play video game music all the time and movie music all the time is that's what keeps the interest of the general public. If they did just Beethoven symphonies all the time, even really good ones, like, well, I mean, they're all good, but like, what I mean is the good symphonic music that is timeless, it won't keep the funding. And people do different things. Like they'll do memberships. Like you can go to a concert that would cost you like $30 a ticket, but it's free for you because you pay $12 a month or something like that. They do that, but the symphony, I don't know where it's getting its funding. Maybe the government. I don't know. Cult Television says Zimmer has trained all his juniors to make the Zimmer sound. That's the sad part. Like Zimmer just needs to sound like Zimmer. Not every person needs to sound like Zimmer. Just like Zimmer is Zimmer. Just be your own composer. But his pupil Göransson, if they are teacher pupil, he sounds just like Zimmer. But he sounds, I don't want to say inferior. He just sounds like a degree less. He does not know how to work with transitions. He does not. If you hear that the Mandalorian theme, there's this after the whole woo thing, like whatever. It's a signature, whatever. It's okay. It's all right. It's not the greatest thing in the world, but according to Jon Favreau, it's the best thing he's ever heard. But after he does that, he goes into this the main sort of melody, and then he's supposed to do this build up into this like transition, and I understood the chords he was working with, but the way he orchestrated it and put it in all the different voices did not work. And then it was like this little ba 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 ba, but the transition right into it's like da 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 da, and it sounds like a Russian like some sort of Russian dance you would see in a ballroom or something like that, like something that didn't fit from the Western whole thing to the John Williams-esque theme. It's not a good transition. It sounds like a Russian opera, and I'm playing in the pit orchestra, and I'm trying to do this. Oh, all of a sudden we're in Star Wars. Okay. I knew what chords he was working with, but he didn't have the classic training. I don't think Göransson is classically trained. Anyway, and people say you don't have to be classically trained. I mean, I know like Uematsu, the Final Fantasy composer, he wasn't classically trained, but he had an ear for it. You don't have to be classically trained. My point is though, if you don't know how to compose transitions that well, maybe you should be classically trained. Composing is a discipline as anything else. Anyway, I'm going on a rant. And of course, I go over the 90-minute mark. Chronism. Nepotism is with family members. What's chronism? I'm not familiar with that word. I use nepotism because it's like the family dynamics is in the profession. Like, excuse me, professional family. I'll have to look up the word chronism, but I can't look it up on this computer because I just don't know how to use this computer besides maintaining the chat. My wonderful prof says it is the same actor from S.H.I.E.L.D. Yeah, he's great. I just wish I knew how to pronounce his last name. Nathaniel says, give me a full orchestra over synthesizers. Synths have their place, but I don't want an oversaturation of it. Yeah, well, the thing is, and I made this point before, it's its own topic, really, but, synths have their place. But you can have a variety of so many different sounds. Every electronic composer needs to sound different from the next guy. You need to have your own signature, whether you're working with the orchestra or not. And since if you're not careful, people are just gonna sound the same. So like if you're gonna use synths, use it like as my professor would compliment me on after the stream, use it like Van Halen. Van Halen uses synths in a very specific way. Dream Theater uses synths in a very specific way. Tangerine Dream uses synths in a very specific way. They all have their own voices. Whitesnake, like all these people use synths in a very nice way. Billy Idol is another one I'm thinking of. Who else am I thinking of? But these people are using synths in very dynamically different ways. It's their own signature. Anyway, continue. But no, you gotta have the experience. You don't have to have the music. You just have to have the experience. So, I mean, being a little facetious. You guys are talking about Final Fantasy Remake. I'm going down a little bit. Megatron says, what? You never seen Indiana Jones? I know I'm one of those rare people. And no, I will not do a reaction video. My first time seeing Indiana Jones. I know I'll like it. So that's all I know. Yeah, I haven't seen a lot of classic films. Because I was never a movie person. Now that I'm married to my prof, we're more movie people. But I was much more of like a reader. I'm not a bookworm, but I gravitate to stories in the written form a lot more. All right. Mark Stouffer, I think is how you pronounce it, right? The undifferentiated Doom drone tone is so overplayed. I agree. I like drones, but people really don't know how to compose over a drone, and they don't know how to break the drone up. And you're right, it's overplayed. All right. All right. Private Eye. Daft Punk. Yeah, you missed them. Interstellar 555. Is it called 5555? 5555? I don't know how to read that out loud. Let's see. Continuing on. All right. Oh, I'm not going yet, Ghost Planet. I know it's. I hope I made sense this whole time. You guys have been here. Um, so I slightly feel like a lack of sleep, just a bit, you know. Um, David Clark says, "Bless the hearts of Nintendo developers." Yeah, we'll see. Talking about Tifa. Brian says Cloud has more of a dry wit rather than something really to laugh out loud like do you pronounce it Zidane in FF9? Yeah, like Zidane. Zidane. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Sorry. I know what he looks like though. Yeah, he's not like over the top. He's not laugh out loud all the time. He's just more he is cut and dry, but like people are like they made him like really stoic. Like even in the Kingdom Hearts version of him, he's just like, I've got to find Sephiroth. It's like I even froze just right when my eyes are drooping. But that's kind of like I made my face look like that, you know. Well, I know the story, so nothing's gonna spoil the story for me. Cloud is messed up in the head for a very specific reason. Um, yeah, it's true. All right, continuing on down. Megatron once mentioned he, went to a John Williams symphony concert while on a field trip before, and it was awesome. You heard Superman, Star Wars, Harry Potter, yeah, um, and like they're all from John Williams, but they're all distinctly their own story. Harry Potter sounds nothing like Star Wars. In fact, one of my gripes with the sequel trilogy soundtrack with John Williams, Maestro Williams himself, his theme for Rey sound like if you hear that very first moment of her suite, her thematic suite, um, it sounds like Harry Potter. Why? Because he's using chimes in a very 18th century way. You know, that would be perfect for an old English magical schoolhouse that is Hogwarts. Doesn't work for a female scavenger of parts on a desert planet. Just doesn't work. And he was, and even himself, Williams, I think, had expressed that the chimes were to demonstrate her innocence, but it's like that's the wrong instrument for Star Wars. I mean, okay, no, I'll be careful. You do use chimes for Star Wars, but when you're conveying space travel, because it's fantastical and you're going fast and you're moving through stars and planets and stuff like that, that's fine. You can use the chimes that way, but for a specific person in that very specific way, it sounded like Harry Potter. And I did not approve of it. David Clark says, I do think that Can You Hear the Music thing was nice. I believe that has some weird tempo changes and stuff like that. What are we talking about? I can't remember. I think it was something I said. You say, hey, Sound Engraver, remember when people asked if Rebel Moon was the next Star Wars? Why are people comparing it to Star Wars? Like Star Wars, it's its own thing. You can't compare it. Now they're asking if Dune is the next Star Wars. I guess people are desperate for Star Wars since Disney messed up things badly. Well, Disney didn't mess up for anything for me because I go to the originals. I know you probably can't see that. It's like I can't. That made my eyes dizzy. But Disney didn't mess up Star Wars for me. I'm happy about Star Wars because I know what good Star Wars is. I'm listening to Outbound Flight. The reader's fantastic, and it's a good story. We get to see Sabayoth. Thrawn is actually pretty. He's pretty interesting. He doesn't hold my interest forever. So I like the back and forth between where he is, and then you got Obi-Wan Kenobi. Anakin is 14 years old. Mace Windu sounds great. Yeah, it's good stuff. Cronyism? I gotta look up this word. Cronism. Cronyism? That sounds like mafia. Like get the goons, man. Get my goons and get them ready for my next nefarious task. I think this yes was for when I was talking about Van Halen. Yeah, because David Clark says Van Halen is fine aged cheddar as far as synth cheese is concerned. Wahahaha. Well, and also they use real instruments like his voice and stuff like that. Yeah. Zidane is the name. All right, let's move on through these chats. You have the Final Fantasy VII movie Advent Children to thank for the more morose take on Cloud's character. Okay. Was that an actual film? I remember it being so short when I saw snippets of it. But yeah. The way Sound Engraver says, Andrea Hernandez says, the way Sound Engraver says it's all about the experience. It sounds so hippie to me. That's because it's a hippie experience. It's a hippie sentiment, especially in the art movement. Let me continue though. What you say? It's all about the experience, man. Life is about the experience, man. I mean, I had professors that would, especially like the ethnomusicology professors where I went to school. They were true blue. Like they would talk about like Tibetan music, and then they would go in their archives, and then they would invite all their graduate students to their house, and they would smoke pot before it became legal in Washington State. They were the hippies of the hippies. My professors, however, they were so straight-jacketed. I was afraid of my professors. I wouldn't be afraid of them now. I'd probably make fun of them in like not like playful. I'd probably tease them and stuff like that. But as an undergrad, I was so scared of them. I'm like, oh, okay, yes, sir, you know. I was very, and now the stuff I know about music now, it's like I could take them. Bring it on. I probably would have fun, a lot more fun, having my discussions with them now. I was very afraid of my professors. They were so no nonsense, and now I would be I'd be a trickster in the room now. I totally would, I would have such a fun time with them. But I don't even know if they're still there anymore, to be honest. I was like back in 2011. All right, continuing. $73 elephants. Welcome. Good to see you. David Clark is saying, can you hear the music part from the Oppenheimer composer Göransson? I might have missed the context of. Yeah, there's one part where he's actually changing the tempo in real time. That's a very interesting idea, and it can be done. It's done in electronic music, and I like it, but it can't just be that, you know. Good question, Sound Engraver. Why do people compare specific sci-fi stories to Star Wars? If you want to watch Star Wars, I would go to the OG trilogy, the prequel trilogy, and the 2002 Clone Wars animated series. I don't know. I don't know why people compare different sci-fi stories with Star Wars. I mean, like, it's its own story. I mean, I guess you can draw some similarities between that and like something like Stargate, but Stargate is its own thing too. In fact, actually, Stargate had a funny moment, kind of almost breaking the fourth wall. Like sometimes O'Neill, he doesn't like science fiction. His character, it's a sci-fi show, and his character doesn't like sci-fi. He likes The Simpsons. There was one moment where he's inviting Carter because he's thinking something's wrong with Carter, and he's like, "Well, Teal, come on, let's take her. Let's have her. Let's bring some Star Wars. Let's have some pizza. Have a good time. We brought pizza and Star Wars to have a good time." And he says Teal'c's seen Star Wars. Like, what is it, Teal'c? 8? And Teal'c's like 9. So Teal'c, who's an alien, has seen Star Wars like 9 times because he loves it so much. It's a different story though. Like, it's a completely different story. It is so different from different sci-fi stories. And so when people say, oh, Dune's replacing Star Wars, it's like, no, it's not. It can't replace Star Wars. Star Wars, it's its own thing. You can't have pumpkin pie replace apple pie. Maybe you like pumpkin pie more than apple pie, but you're not gonna have apple pie cease to exist just because pumpkin pie is set on the table. So it's kind of weird. It's weird that they're comparing sci-fi like I don't know. All right. So it is almost the 2 hour mark. Let's see, continue on. Yeah, Gurnson. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. I don't think I am, but sorry. Okay, so you say Nathaniel Advent Children was an actual film, but the producers admitted that it was a movie made for the fans more for than the general audience. Yeah, it seemed out of like when I saw it, it just seemed out of place. I can't quite describe it. But then again, I never played the games. I've only seen the games played. Nathaniel says, so what are the chances if you haven't played the game or have any prior knowledge about the characters or the world, then you're going to get lost? So chances are if you haven't played the game, the movie will lose you. Yeah, okay, I can see that. All right. Scrolling on down. Can you hear the click of the mouse? I usually just okay. Oh, I reached the end of the comments. Yeah. So I guess we'll probably end it there. So just kind of as what I want to say as a recap is, yes, Dune was a cinematic experience. Is it going to be long lived? I don't think so. People are going to go to the next thing, and they're not going to talk about Dune in a few years. At least not the films. People will always talk about the books, but I don't think they're going to talk about the films. I just don't think the films have life. When people say, "Oh, long live cinema," like the experience, that's what matters, guys. We need to come back to that cinematic experience again. It's like, yes, have an experience, but it can't be. That's all that is. Like it needs to be the story. And a lot of people, when they talked about the story of Dune, they talked mostly about the changes made in the Dune film. So just kind of going back to the thesis the thesis of the stream before we wrap it up is experience is a sentiment from the 20th century art movements where it was just that time and that place and what happened then, and that's all that matters. Doesn't matter if you talk about it tomorrow, doesn't matter if you forget about it. It's not meant to have a life of its own. It's not meant to have its own legacy. The artists, they didn't care about legacy at the time. They only cared about ideas and experiences, and they cared about the attendee being part of the art, being immersed in the art itself. But it was never meant to. It was never meant to last long. It was playing on. It was attacking and mocking ideas of what normal is. Like these art movements of the 20th century, the happenings, the Fluxus movement, Dadaism, around the time of World War I, they were challenging conventions of art. How art really shouldn't be a performance on a stage because the stage is the barrier, or it shouldn't be a painting on a wall because the frame and the painting itself is a barrier. What needs to happen is the artist becomes the painting. You'll see a lot of a lot of ideas of civil rights and second and third wave feminism getting into, well, not third wave but second wave, getting into like go ahead, I'm an art piece, but you can touch this art piece. So like the viewers like ready to touch the body parts of the woman or something like that. Things like that are scandalous, that you remember the experience. Not that I've experienced that, but the whole point is it's the experience. It's not the art itself. It's not about art staying as a separate thing. It's not about art having you recall something or think on something or dwell on something as a very good piece of art on its own. It's supposed to be something fleeting. Like these art movements wanted art to be fleeting, or they wanted to bridge art and real life as one and the same. Like, so me going over and making toast and buttering that toast and eating it in front of the audience. Like That happened in the 1960s and 70s. It still happens in college today. I think before we wrap it up, I'll just tell you this story. In my graduate studies in Milwaukee, we did performance art all the time. I my friend, I had a friend in college composed a, a piece of music where he's driving the car, and then through the roof, the sunroof, another friend of mine is playing trombone and playing music while the car is driving around the parking lot, and we're supposed to be standing in one fixed point, so the car and the trombone will sound, from like distant, a point of distance, and then the trombone will come nearer as the car comes nearer and stuff like that. We hacked watermelons. No joke, no joke. This is a performance art, and this is kind of related to the whole experience. But we would hack. No, one artist hacked a bunch of watermelons, like sliced it up and hacked it, and the watermelon juice would be the music score for our improvisation. And I would sing or I would play violin based on where the watermelon juice fell on the piece of cardboard or construction paper. That's what I mean by experience. Like, I don't know what the music sounds like now. I'm not supposed to know. All I remembered was we chopped up watermelons, and like the seeds would be notes and the juice would be the direction of the notes and the graphic score and stuff like that. That's the stuff we did in graduate school. That's the stuff you won't hear in my music, by the way, when I release more music this year. That it's all about the experience. So this whole cinematic, just wrapping it up real quick, the whole cinematic experience was like, with Dune, is that's all it needs. And it's not true. If you don't have a story, if you don't have a riveting plot and good characters and characterization and themes and a thematic soundtrack and a musical soundtrack, you're not going to have an art that extends its life beyond the theatrical release. As soon as Dune is done being released and seen in theaters, no one's going to talk about it. It's just a hype. It's just a trend. And it's because no one cares about the story anymore. So that was the whole point of my story. I wish I talked more about the art movements, but maybe another time. Anyway, I had fun talking with you. So hopefully another SuperCollider video. Maybe next stream, be on the lookout. I might not stream next week because it's my birthday and my mother-in-law, well, the weekend is my birthday, so my mother-in-law might have some plans. So I might stream, I might not stream, but we'll see. Anyway, I will catch you later, guys. Thank you so much for watching and listening. And until I see you next, keep producing, preserving, and promoting that good art that you love. The real art experience.